It was a warm, cloudless afternoon in the sleepy town of Redwood Pines, the kind of day when time moved slower and even the breeze felt lazy. 7-year-old Emily Parker had been staying with her grandmother for the summer while her parents were away on a work trip. She loved these visits, the fresh-baked pies, the tire swing in the backyard, and most of all, the little patch of woods just beyond the fence. It was her secret kingdom, filled with trees she imagined as castles and rocks she called thrones. That afternoon, Emily had chased a yellow butterfly past the vegetable garden, through the tall grass, and under the split-rail fence. She didn't notice how far she'd wandered. The butterfly danced just out of reach, leading her through the trees and down toward an old, rusted set of train tracks that curved like a snake between the hills. The tracks had been there long before Emily was born. Her grandmother always warned her never to go near them. "They're dangerous," she had said. "Even if they look abandoned, trains still come through." But Emily wasn't thinking about warnings. She was thinking about butterflies and adventure and pretending to be a brave explorer in a forgotten land. As she stepped onto the tracks, she noticed the butterfly had disappeared. She looked down at her sneakers, one of which had landed awkwardly between the wooden ties. She tried to lift her foot, but it didn't budge. Her shoelace had somehow slipped between two metal plates and gotten stuck. She twisted her ankle, tugged, and tried to hop free, but the knot only pulled tighter. Emily frowned, then crouched down, trying to reach the laces. Her fingers were small, and the knot was stubborn. She yanked again, frustration turning into worry. A bird cawed in the trees above, and for the first time, Emily realized how quiet it was. No more butterflies, no more adventure. Just her, the tracks, and a growing sense that something was wrong. Back at the house, Emily's grandmother had just finished folding laundry when she noticed the back door open and the screen swinging. In the breeze, her eyes darted to the fence line, the woods. She dropped the towels and ran outside, calling Emily's name. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, Emily was still struggling. Her heart was starting to pound harder, her throat tightening. Then, without warning, a low sound echoed in the distance. A horn, long, haunting, and far away but unmistakable. It was a train. Emily froze. She turned her head and saw nothing yet, but the sound was getting louder. She looked down at her foot and pulled harder, her fingers trembling now. "Come on," she whispered to herself, her voice cracking. Miles away, a cargo train had just begun its approach through the Redwood Pines line, moving faster than usual to make up for lost time. The conductor, James Holloway, was sipping coffee and chatting with his assistant in the engine car. Neither of them knew what lay around the curve ahead. Back near the tracks, something rustled in the bushes. A pair of sharp brown eyes watched Emily from the trees. It was Max, a scruffy-looking stray dog who had roamed Redwood Pines for nearly a year. He was thin, dirty, and mostly avoided by townsfolk who thought he was trouble. But Max wasn't just wandering. He was listening, sensing something off. Then he heard a toother train horn, faint but urgent, and the sound of a little girl crying. Max moved. He darted toward the tracks, his paws kicking up dust, heart pounding faster than it had in months. He didn't know why he was running. He only knew one thing. Someone needed help. Max had never run this fast before. His legs pumped across the forest floor, weaving between trees, ducking under branches, and following the scent of panic. It was more than just instinct. It was as if something inside him knew exactly where to go. Each bark echoing from Emily's cries pulled him closer, and the sound of the train's horn was no longer distant. Cliffs real and coming fast. Emily, still crouched on the tracks, was now crying openly. Her small fingers fumbled with the stubborn shoelace as her other foot scraped the wood beneath her. The whistle blew again, this time louder, sending a jolt of fear through her body. She looked up and saw the tracks disappear around a bend in the trees. That's where the train would come from. And she was still stuck. "I need help," she cried, her voice cracking into the wind. "Please." At that moment, Max burst from the brush like a rocket, his fur tangled, tongue lolling, eyes locked on the little girl. Emily gasped. She had seen the dog before at the grocery store parking lot, near the schoolyard fence, even once behind the church on Main Street. Everyone said he was wild, a stray that no one could catch. But here he was, running straight at her. Emily instinctively pulled back. "Go away," she shouted through tears, unsure whether he was friend or foe. But Max didn't stop, he didn't growl, didn't bark. He skidded to a halt in front of her, sniffed once, and immediately zeroed in on her trapped foot. "What are you doing?" Emily asked, confused and frightened. Max bit down on the shoelace and tugged. At first, nothing happened. The knot held tight. Max repositioned and bit again, this time closer to the trapped section. He pulled hard, his body straining, teeth clamped around the laces. Emily whimpered but held still. Realizing this dog wasn't here to hurt her, he was trying to save her. Far down the track, the train's massive headlights came into view, slicing through the curve and sending a shimmer of light down the metal rails. In the engine car, conductor James Holloway squinted, then sat bolt upright. "Is that a kid?" he said aloud. That his assistant leaned forward, mouth dropping open. "There's something on the tracks." James grabbed the radio and hit the emergency brake. The brakes screamed, metal grinding against metal. But he knew the truth: cargo trains didn't stop fast, especially not on a hill. Back on the tracks, Max yanked again, his paws slipping slightly. The shoelace stretched but refused to break. Emily screamed as the whistle roared again, much closer now. Her eyes widened as she saw the glow growing larger. "Please, hurry," she sobbed. Max made a strange sound, a mix between a growl and a groan, and suddenly shifted strategy. He let go of the lace and jumped to the side, tugging at the tongue of the shoe itself. With a desperate jerk, he pulled the shoe halfway off. Emily's foot twisted painfully, but finally slipped free. She fell backward, away from the metal rail, but not far enough. The train was seconds away. Max didn't hesitate. With a bark that echoed like a battle cry, he lunged at Emily, his body slamming into her side with surprising force. The momentum knocked her off the tracks, her shoulder hitting the ground hard as dust flew up around them. Max tumbled after her, his side brushing the rail just as the train roared past with deafening speed. Grass and leaves flew in every direction. The ground shook beneath them. Emily curled into a ball, covering her ears, eyes squeezed shut. Max lay beside her, motionless for a moment, chest rising and falling rapidly. The danger had passed, but neither of them could fully process what had just happened. Not yet. The train thundered by like a beast awakened, shaking the earth beneath them. The sound of wheels screeching against metal rails rang in the air long after it was gone. Leaves fluttered down from the trees, and dust danced in the golden sunlight. As silence slowly returned to the woods, Emily opened her eyes, blinking against the bright sky above. Her ears were still ringing, and her heart felt like it would never stop racing. She wasn't sure where she was for a moment. Then she remembered the train, the tracks, her stuck shoe, the dog. She sat up slowly, her elbows sore from the fall. Max lay beside her, chest heaving, one of his legs trembling slightly. His fur was coated in dirt, his sides scraped raw from hitting the gravel. But his eyes were open, fixed on her as if to say, "You're safe now." Emily leaned over him, unsure of what to do. "Are you okay?" she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes again, this time not from fear, but from relief. Max gave a soft grunt, then wagged his tail once, just once, but it was enough. Emily threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly, burying her face in his scruffy fur. "Thank you," she whispered over and over. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Back at the house, Emily's grandmother was running barefoot across the field behind the backyard, her heart pounding harder than it had in years. She had called Emily's name 10 times already, voice cracking from panic. She knew her granddaughter loved the woods, but when she spotted the break in the fence and the distant trail, her stomach dropped. She reached the edge of the trees and kept going, brushing branches aside, calling louder now. "Emily." Her voice caught in her throat when she heard a faint bark in return. It was coming from the tracks. Meanwhile, the train had come to a full stop nearly half a mile down the line. Conductor James Holloway jumped from the cabin as soon as the wheels ground to a halt. He sprinted back up the tracks with his assistant trailing behind, fear etched on both their faces. "Did we hit her?" the assistant asked breathlessly. "I don't know," James replied, his heart pounding. "But I saw a little girl and a dog on those rails." As they neared the bend, James slowed, unsure of what he might find. Then he saw something move in the grass, just off the tracks, a small figure sitting upright, his breath caught. Emily stood up slowly, still hugging Max, her clothes dusty and her face streaked with tears. She turned as the men approached. Her eyes were wide but calm now, the terror fading. "You're okay?" James asked, kneeling beside her. Emily nodded. "He saved me," she said quietly, pointing to Max. James looked at the dog, then back at the girl. "You're lucky," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You are so lucky." A few minutes later, Emily's grandmother burst through the trees and saw her standing next to the train conductor. For a moment, she couldn't move, stood frozen in place as tears flooded her eyes. "Emily!" she finally screamed, running across the tracks. Emily ran to her, colliding in a hug that felt like it might never end. They both sobbed in each other's arms, the world around them fading as relief washed over them like a wave. Max stood a few feet away, tail wagging, ears perked. He didn't move closer, just sat quietly and watched. Emily turned to him. "Can we take him home?" she asked her grandmother. The older woman wiped her tears, her chest still heaving. She looked at the dog. Her face softened. "We're not leaving without him." Emily's grandmother held her tightly as if letting go would make her vanish. Her fingers trembled as they brushed Emily's hair back, checking her over for cuts and bruises. Emily had a few scrapes and a dirty face, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. Beside them, Max limped closer, sniffing the edge of the grass where the train had just passed. His front leg was clearly hurt, and he was panting hard, but his eyes remained alert, shifting between Emily and the others as if still on guard. The train conductor, James Holloway, crouched near Max and reached out a cautious hand. "He's a good boy," he said softly. "Saved her life. I saw it with my own eyes." Emily turned and gave Max a gentle pat. "He's not just a good boy," she said. "He's a hero." Max lowered his head slightly, tail wagging once as if acknowledging the praise. Emily's grandmother wiped away a tear. "We need to get him to a vet. He's hurt." James nodded and stood up. "I can call ahead. There's a clinic in town. I'll radio the dispatcher and explain everything." While he made the call, Emily knelt beside Max and gently ran her hand along his back. He winced slightly when she touched his leg. "We'll get you help," she whispered. "I promise. Soon." A red pickup truck arrived at the edge of the woods. It belonged to Dr. Carla Mason, the town's only veterinarian, who had rushed over after the dispatcher relayed the emergency. She jumped out with a calm urgency, her medical bag in hand. "Is this the dog?" she asked, kneeling beside Max. Emily nodded. "He saved me." Dr. Mason examined Max carefully, checking his leg, eyes, and breathing. "He's a little banged up," she said, "but nothing's broken. Just some deep bruising and scrapes. He's a tough one." Max licked her hand, and the vet chuckled. "He knows he did something special." They carefully lifted Max into the back of the truck, laying him on a blanket. Emily climbed in with him, refusing to leave his side. Her grandmother followed, sitting in the front seat and glancing back every few seconds to check on them. As they drove to the clinic, the sun began to dip behind the hills, casting a golden glow across the town. Word of the incident had already begun to spread, thanks to the train crew's radio report. By the time they reached the clinic, a small crowd had gathered outside. Neighbors, shopkeepers, and even the local newspaper editor. Everyone wanted to see the stray dog who had become a hero. Inside, Dr. Mason cleaned Max's wounds, gave him something for the pain, and bandaged his leg. Emily stayed by his side the whole time, her hand never leaving his fur. When it was over, the vet turned to her with a gentle smile. "He'll be okay, but he needs rest and a safe place to recover." Emily looked at her grandmother. "Can he stay with us?" Her grandmother hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "After today, he belongs with us. I wouldn't feel right if he wasn't close by." Emily beamed and leaned over Max. "You're coming home," she whispered, "for good." Outside the clinic, someone had taken a photo of Emily and Max. It showed the little girl with dirt on her cheeks and tears in her eyes, her arms wrapped around the dog who had saved her. The image would soon appear on social media and in the next day's newspaper under the headline, "Stray Dog Saves Local Girl from Oncoming Train." But for Emily, none of that mattered. All she cared about was that Max was alive and that he was hers. The next morning, Redwood Pines woke up to the sound of news spreading like wildfire. By breakfast, almost every resident had either heard the story or seen the photograph. At T District, Emily clinging to the scruffy stray dog that saved her life. The town, usually quiet and slow-paced, now buzzed with emotion, disbelief, and awe. At Maple Leaf Cafe, two old men who played chess on the porch each morning stopped mid-game to talk about the dog. In the hardware store, customers lined up, not just to buy paint or tools, but to ask if the story was really true. At the school, teachers huddled during lunch, passing a printed copy of the newspaper across tables like it was a treasure. The photo on the front page showed something raw and real, something that didn't need words. It was clear in Emily's eyes, in the way Max leaned against her, as if he'd known her his whole life. By mid-morning, people began showing up at the vet clinic. They brought bags of food, chew toys, blankets, and even homemade dog treats. One woman brought a small red sweater she had knitted overnight. Another dropped off a framed copy of the newspaper headline. One man offered to pay for all of Max's medical care. Dr. Carla Mason had never seen anything like it. "It's like he belongs to all of us now," she told a local reporter as she gently stroked Max's fur. "And maybe he always did." At the Parker house, Emily and her grandmother were still trying to adjust to the attention. Reporters had left messages. Television crews from the nearby city wanted interviews. But Emily wasn't thinking about cameras. She was sitting on the living room floor, brushing Max's coat and humming softly. He was recovering faster than anyone expected. His leg was still wrapped, but he had started to move more, his tail wagging stronger each time Emily walked into the room. The fear that once filled his eyes had faded. Now there was only calm and loyalty. The doorbell rang, and Emily's grandmother opened it to find the mayor standing there with a soft smile and a small bouquet of daisies. "We'd like to invite you both to the town square tomorrow," she said. "There's going to be something special." The next day, under a clear sky, a large crowd gathered near the old train crossing on Willow Lane. Emily stood with Max beside her, holding his leash tightly. The town had set up a stage, and a microphone stood in front of a large cloth-covered object. Mayor Thompson stepped forward and began to speak. "Sometimes the community needs a reminder of what courage looks like," she said. "And sometimes that reminder comes from the most unexpected place." She gestured to the covered object. "This town will never forget the day one brave little girl survived a moment of terror, or the stray dog who didn't hesitate to risk everything to save her." With a nod, two volunteers pulled the cloth away, revealing a bronze statue of Max. It wasn't perfect. His fur looked a bit too tidy, and his ears were slightly too big, but everyone gasped just the same. At his feet, cast in metal, was a child's shoe. Below the sculpture was a simple plaque that read, "Max, the dog who ran toward the danger." The crowd clapped, some people wiping away tears. Emily looked up at Max, then back at the statue. "He's not just a hero," she whispered to her grandmother. "He's my best friend." Max, as if understanding, leaned against her side. He didn't know about statues or crowds or headlines. All he knew was that the little girl he saved was smiling again and for him. That was everything. That evening, long after the statue unveiling, Emily sat on the porch swing with Max curled at her feet. The sun had slipped behind the hills, casting an orange glow across the sky. The crowd had gone, and the excitement had faded into a warm, peaceful quiet. But Emily couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened, about how different things might have been, about Max and who he really was. She gently stroked his head. "Where did you come from?" she whispered. "How did you even know to help me?" Her grandmother stepped out with 2 mugs of hot cocoa, handing one to Emily and sipping from her own. She sat beside her and looked at Max thoughtfully. "You know," she said. "I think I've seen this dog before, but it was a long time ago." Emily looked up. "Before he became a stray." Her grandmother nodded slowly. "I think he used to belong to someone in town. I just can't remember who." The next day, curiosity spread just as quickly as the news once had. People were now asking not just what Max had done but where he'd come from. One by one, older residents began coming forward with fragments of memory. "He used to wait outside the fire station," said one man. "I remember that wagging tail." "I think he had a name back then," said another. "Different from Max." One afternoon, a woman named Ellen McCoy came into the vet clinic with an old photo in her hand. "I think this is him," she told Dr. Mason. The photo showed a younger Max, clean and bright-eyed, sitting proudly beside a man in a firefighter's uniform. "That's my brother, Daniel," she explained, her voice quiet. "He was a fireman here in Redwood Pines. Max was his dog, went everywhere with him. They were inseparable." Dr. Mason looked at the photo, then down at Max, who was resting on a soft bed nearby. "It's him," she said. "No doubt." Ellen's eyes grew misty. "Daniel died 2 years ago." There was a house fire on Oak Street. He saved a boy inside, but the roof collapsed when he went back in for a second child. They never made it out. Silence filled the room. After the funeral, Max ran off. We searched everywhere, but he was just gone. Dr. Mason felt a chill. So you think he's been out there all this time? Ellen nodded. Maybe looking for someone to protect. Maybe trying to finish what Daniel started. That story reached Emily by the end of the day. Her grandmother read it from a folded piece of paper left at their front door. Emily sat in stunned silence. So, he was a hero before, she whispered. Grandmother nodded. Looks like he never stopped being one. Later that evening, Emily placed the old photo beside Max's water bowl. He sniffed it, then gently licked the corner as if he remembered. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but in Emily's heart, she believed he knew exactly who he had once been on, exactly who he had become again. She curled up next to him on the rug, resting her head against his side. "You didn't find me by accident," she said softly. "You were meant to." Max gave a slow, tired sigh and closed his eyes, his tail thumping once. That night, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter above the little town, and somewhere in the quiet distance, a train rolled past slowly, its whistle long and low, almost like a tribute. Max didn't move, but Emily smiled in her sleep. The dog with no home had found the one place he was always meant to be. The days that followed felt different in Redwood Pines, not just because of the statue in the square, or the photo of Max that now hung in the town library, or even the newspaper articles pinned to cafe walls. No, it was something else, something deeper. People had begun to change. Children who used to walk to school with their heads down now walked taller, sometimes pausing near the statue to pat the base like they were greeting an old friend. Strangers smiled more. Neighbors talked longer. People who had never owned pets stopped by the animal shelter just to visit, and a few left with a new companion. It was as if Max had reminded everyone of something they'd forgotten: the quiet strength in loyalty, the courage to act without hesitation, the power of doing good with no expectation in return. At the center of it all, Max was healing. Though his limp remained, it was hardly noticeable as he followed Emily through the yard or across the living room rug. He had a soft bed now, a name on a collar, and his photo framed on the mantel beside the statue unveiling. But more than that, he had a place in people's hearts. One weekend, the local elementary school invited Emily to speak about what had happened. She stood nervously in front of her classmates and their parents, Max lying at her feet, tail wagging gently. "I used to think heroes wore capes," she began, her voice soft. "But now, I know they can have fur and 4 legs." Max didn't think twice. He didn't ask questions. He just helped me because I needed help, and he didn't even know me. She looked down at Max and smiled. "He's the bravest soul I've ever known." When she finished, the room burst into applause. Teachers wiped away tears. Parents leaned in to hug their children, and Max, with perfect timing, barked once and stood up like he understood every word. Afterward, a little boy named Leo stayed behind. He was quiet, with wide brown eyes, and a nervous habit of twisting his fingers together. His parents stood nearby, talking with the principal. Emily noticed him watching Max with curiosity. "Want to pet him?" she asked, kneeling beside the dog. Leo nodded slowly. As he reached out, Max remained still, allowing the boy's hand to stroke his fur. "My dog ran away last year," Leo whispered. "I thought I'd never feel happy again." Emily didn't say anything at first. She just nodded. "But now," he paused, "maybe I can help a dog like Max. Maybe one who doesn't have a home." Emily smiled. "You'd make a dog really happy." That same afternoon, Leo and his parents visited the animal shelter. They left with a shy brown puppy who wagged his tail non-stop and licked Leo's face the whole ride home. They named him Rusty. Word got around. Over the next few weeks, the shelter saw a surprising rise in adoptions. Families who had never considered pets before were now eager to give them loving homes. And it wasn't just dogs, cats, rabbits, and even 2 turtles found new families. The shelter director called it the Max Effect. At home, Emily and her grandmother received letters from across the country. A teacher in Ohio shared how her students had collected donations for their local shelter after hearing about Max. A teenager in Montana started a fundraiser to build a dog park in her town. A retired soldier in Texas wrote that Max reminded him of the service dog who saved his life overseas. Emily read every letter out loud to Max, while he lay beside her, eyes half closed, tail flicking lazily against the floor. "You're changing the world," she whispered once, kissing his nose. Max didn't move, but his ears twitched ever so slightly as if he heard her, and agreed. He didn't know what legacy meant, but he was building one anyway. The seasons passed gently in Redwood Pines. Summer gave way to crisp autumn winds, and then snow blanketed the streets in white silence. Emily was growing taller now. Her baby voice had faded, replaced by the steady tone of a confident young girl. But one thing never changed. Max was always by her side, though his fur had begun to gray around the muzzle and his movements slowed with time. Max remained as loyal as ever. He followed Emily to the mailbox each morning, waited patiently by her bed at night, and perked up every time he heard the sound of laughter in the house. He had found his forever place, not just in a home but in the heart of a little girl who loved him more than anything in the world. Every Sunday, Emily and her grandmother visited the bronze statue near the train tracks. Emily would bring a flower, sometimes a daisy, sometimes a sunflower, and place it gently at the base. She'd run her fingers along the inscription, "Max, the dog who ran toward the danger." Sometimes other children would be there too, taking photos or reading the story carved on the back. It told of the moment Max saved Emily, of the legacy he had inspired, and of the bond between a child and a stray who had once had nothing but gave everything. As the years passed, Emily began writing short stories about Max. At first they were just for her school, then for a local magazine, and eventually she compiled them into a book titled The Dog Who Found Me. It was published when she turned 14, and it included the original newspaper photo on the first page. The dedication read simply, "For Max, who didn't know he was a hero but acted like one anyway." By then, Max's walks were slower. He no longer chased squirrels or barked at delivery trucks, but he still listened to Emily's voice as if it were music, and he still wagged his tail at the sound of her laughter. One chilly spring morning, Max didn't rise with the sun. Emily found him lying peacefully in his bed by the window, his head resting on his favorite blanket, the one with the stitched image of the train track statue. The room was quiet. There was no pain in his body, no fear in his face. He looked peaceful, like he'd simply closed his eyes to dream of fields and butterflies. Tears spilled down Emily's cheeks as she knelt beside him. She stroked his head gently, just as she had the day he saved her. "You were my angel," she whispered, "and I'll never forget you." The town mourned with her. The mayor ordered flags lowered at town buildings for the day. The newspaper ran a cover story titled, "Redwood Pines bids farewell to its greatest hero." At the base of Max's statue, people left flowers, photos, collars, and handwritten letters. One child left a drawing of Max flying through the sky, a cape around his neck. Emily held a small ceremony at the statue 1 week later. She didn't want a big crowd, just those who truly knew Max's story. She read a short letter aloud, her voice steady but soft. He didn't ask for praise. He never wanted a medal. He just wanted someone to love. And in the end, he gave all of us something we'll carry forever: hope, courage, and the reminder that heroes come in all shapes. Years later, Emily, now a young woman, returned to Redwood Pines with her own daughter. They walked hand in hand to the statue. Her little girl looked up at the bronze dog and asked, "Mama, is that real?" Emily knelt beside her and smiled. He was real. He was the bravest soul I ever knew. The little girl laid a daisy at the base. Max's legacy lived on, not just in metal or memory, but in the hearts of those who still believed that one small act of love could change everything. And sometimes save a life.